All right, here we go again. Welcome to the Otherppl Show, a weekly podcast featuring in-depth conversations with today's leading writers. It is a books and culture show. I am Brad Listi. I'm your host. This is my program. Welcome to it. I hope you're doing okay out there, wherever you happen to be. I hope you're hanging on. Hope you're holding up. You know what I mean. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button wherever you listen, and you can follow me on Instagram and Blue Sky. I'm very happy today to be welcoming Ada Limón onto this show for the very first time. Many of you are probably familiar with Ada and her work. She was the 24th Poet Laureate of the United States of America. I believe her tenure ended just last year, and she is now celebrating the publication of a new book called Against Breaking, on the Power of Poetry. It is available from Scribner. It is both an invitation and a call to action. It is drawn from the work that Ada did as Poet Laureate, and it's about the interconnectivity that she celebrates in her work and that she emphasized as Poet Laureate, about person-to-person interconnectivity, but also the connection that we all share with everything in the natural world. And I just had a wonderful conversation with Ada Limón. I'm very excited to share that with you. It's coming up momentarily. Today's episode is brought to you by Harper, publisher of The Left and The Lucky, the new novel by Willie Vlottin, now an official selection of the Otherppl Book Club. It's the official April pick. The Otherppl Book Club is my book club. I curate the club, and I talk to the authors here on this program. It is perhaps the most elegant and effective way to support this show and the work that I do. If you would like to sign up for the book club, you can do that at otherppl.com. You get a new book delivered to your door every 30 days. And again, I interview the authors here on the show, so it makes for a very enriching and holistic literary experience. The Left and The Lucky, the new novel by Willie Vlottin, is this month's pick. It is a heartbreaking and tender novel about two young brothers, the vicissitudes of fate and unexpected connection. It's a beautiful and bittersweet portrait that illuminates the power of friendship and how it can save lives in multiple ways. One more time, it's called The Left and The Lucky by Willie Vlottin, available now from Harper. Today's episode is also brought to you by Deep Dive. Deep Dive is an incredible new learning platform that creates in-depth audio courses for writers. The flagship course from Deep Dive is called How to Write a Novel, and it is more than 50 hours in length, and it features insight, inspiration, and instruction from nearly 24 of today's most celebrated contemporary authors, including Emily St. John Mandel, Melissa Broder, Steve Almond, Stephen Graham Jones, and many more. You can listen online or via the Deep Dive app. For more information, go to deepdive.audio. Okay, so my guest, once again, is Ada Limón, 24th Poet Laureate of the United States and author of a new book called Against Breaking, on the Power of Poetry, out there now from Scribner. Ada Limón is the author of 7 books of poetry, including Startlement, new and selected poems, The Hurting Kind, which was a finalist for the Griffin Prize, The Carrying, which won the National Book Critics Circle Award and was a finalist for the Penn Gene Stein Book Award, and Bright Dead Things, which was named a finalist for the National Book Award, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and the Kingsley Tufts Award. Ada Limón is a MacArthur Fellow, a Guggenheim Fellow. She was named a 2024 Time Magazine Woman of the Year, and she is also the author of 2 picture books. It is such a pleasure to have her here on the program and to get to share our conversation with all of you. So let's get to it. Here I am with Ada Limón, and her new book, one more time, is called Against Breaking.
I'm working right now out of my childhood bedroom. I turned my childhood bedroom into my office. And it's really fascinating. It's been about 2 years now, but it's been an incredible experience. And right now it's starting to feel a little like, oh, this is life. But as I was moving in, it started to feel like this was some kind of mythological cycle that I was just somehow meant to be fulfilling.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think back. I mean, I moved a little bit when I was a kid, so there were multiple childhood bedrooms, but this sounds like it was your entire childhood house, or most of it at least.
Yeah, until I was 15.
Okay. I'm glad it's your office and not your bedroom. It'd be weird to like move back into the bedroom that was your bedroom.
It's hard for me to even nap in this room. There's something strange about it. Feels like I'm going back in time too much.
Okay. And how many years away? Because I know you lived in New York for a spell.
Yeah.
You've lived in Kentucky. Like you've been away from Sonoma and California for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I moved out of Sonoma at 17 and then tried to move back in 2010 and then moved to Kentucky in 2011 and then stayed there until 2024.
Okay. So This is another interesting aspect because I have had the experience of returning after a long period away, like uninterrupted period away, because my parents subsequently moved from the towns that I was raised in. So it's like we were all gone.
Yeah.
I maybe you came back and visited more than I did, but what is the experience of like not only being back in your childhood home, but also being back in the town that you were raised in, but many years after the fact, and so much has to have changed in that part of the country, especially, I would imagine.
You know, it's funny because Sonoma itself has changed, and I'm a little outside of town in a smaller little hamlet. And yes, that has changed, but it's also very much the same. There's the firehouse. There is the local bar. There's the same market. It still doesn't have that huge of a population. So the small town I'm in is actually very much the same, which is lovely. Some of it has been shaped by the 2017 fire. And so the new construction you see is primarily people rebuilding. A lot of people stayed and rebuilt. So that has shifted. But a lot of my childhood friends are still here, which is great.
Oh.
In fact, we graduated from elementary school together, a group of friends, and we were called, our mascot was the Demons. We were the Dunbar Demons. So we still hang out. The Dunbar Demons, we have a book club, and we are all in the area still. It's really wonderful.
What were you like as a kid? Like, you've gone on to have this career as a poet, which like that phrase alone is that's rare air. That's so odd, especially in an American context, the career as a poet, but you've done it. And did you signal this when you look back at yourself as a young person? Do you think like, oh yeah, that makes sense? Or are you shocked by what has happened for you?
I knew I wanted to do something in the creative arts. I felt like I was always interested in making things and performing and music, dance, all of those things. But I didn't know what lane it would be in. And I certainly didn't know if it was anything I could make a living at. And I'm not sure how much I still know that. But I feel as if as a child, I was really interested in creation, making things, and what it was to make something out of your own imagination. That fascinated me. It still fascinates me.
And poetry is very specialized. And for me, anyway, maybe just as a consumer, but I would imagine there's a strong element of this in most poets' work. It's a very spiritual literary art form. Maybe they all are, but like poetry seems like especially so.
I agree.
And then where are you? Do you mind saying where you are spiritually? I'm always curious, like how poets are oriented to the world in that way.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I do think of my poetry practice as a spiritual practice. I am an atheist, but I really believe in the interconnectedness of all of us to nature, to the planet itself, to the big wonder that is the world, the universe. And that to me is a spiritual practice, to feel that connectedness between all living things, all living beings. And that to me, that vibrancy and aliveness that I witness in the world is very much a part of my work. And so I think of it as a spiritual work. I think of it as a work of gratitude. I think of making language sacred. I think of excavating what it is to experience humanity at this point in time on a planet that is experiencing what it is experiencing right now, where we are with the climate crisis, where we are with species declination, all of that. So a big part of my work is recognizing mortality and understanding that mortality is what brings us back into the world again and again and again, because you don't want to miss this life. You don't want to miss it. And you only have one, and this is it. And so I would say that I'm a deeply spiritual person, but I don't believe in a God with a capital G.
I can imagine growing up in Northern California that this appreciation for nature and this sense or this appreciation for the interconnection that you talked about would be maybe easier to grasp. I get that piece of it, but I'm also wondering maybe if like your atheism is something that you kind of move toward on your own, or if it was like passed down to you through the generations.
My mother is an atheist, and I think she raised me in that way. And I believe my father is an atheist as well, but I think he would say more agnostic. But he was also raised Mexican Catholic. And so I think there was a lot of tradition there that he was connected to that's still important to him. But I was raised with a real openness towards a different kind of spirituality that was not religion.
And what about creativity? Like that kind of runs in your family. I want to say your mother is a visual artist, right?
Yeah. My mother is a painter. She doesn't paint much anymore, but in fact, this house is full of her paintings. It's really marvelous. And I grew up going to her studio. And before she was a painter, she was primarily doing ceramics. So she did sculptures and dishes and mugs, and all of my dishes in the house are plates and mugs that she made. So I feel like my life has always been full of people who made things, who created things. My stepfather has been a writer, and my father writes and plays guitar, and I feel like it's a very creative family.
And when you left Sonoma to go off to college, I believe you went to the University of Washington and you attended drama school.
Yeah.
So that was the first piece. Like before you got to poetry, you were thinking of what? Acting, directing?
Yeah, I loved poetry before then, I'll admit. I worked at the local bookstore, the independent bookstore in town, Reader's Books, which is wonderful, and it still exists. And I worked there starting at 15. It was my first job. So, my first real job. And I loved, we would host poetry readings all the time. So that was my first real experience with poetry, was working at the bookstore and being the person that adjusted the mic and got the pitcher of water and helped writers come in and sell their books. So I had that experience and I was really connected to it that way. But I had tried to write poems and failed. I thought, oh, that's not anything I can do. And then when I went to the University of Washington, the drama department had all of these people running around singing, and people were barefoot and dancing. And I thought, oh, I want to hang out with these people. They were like the perfect, theater nerds. And it's just exactly what I needed.
My daughter is a theater nerd.
Yay.
which I'm not like neither my wife nor I are performers. I guess there's some element of
I
performance.
mean, yeah.
Kind of.
You're a performer, but okay.
Kind of, I guess. But I mean, not like theatrical, I don't think,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But it's just odd to us. We're like, wow, she's good at acting and, really likes it. But maybe she'll go off to college and run around barefoot. That sounds nice.
Yeah. It was really wonderful. And it wasn't until my junior year when I had taken every single elective inside of the drama department. And they said, you need to take some electives outside of the drama department in order to fulfill your graduation requirements. And I was trying to think of what I wanted to take. And I remembered my love for poetry. And I took Poetry 101. And I loved it. It was a huge survey course and I loved it.
Was that the big pivot?
Yeah.
And when you were working at this bookstore as a teenager, were there any like big name authors that came through that you recall?
There were. Oh yeah. We had a poetry festival. And so we had, Phil Levine and Sharon Olds, and we had Joseph Brodsky. We had Carolyn Kaiser. I got to meet Bill Moyers while he was doing the Power of the Word series. And so, yeah, we had quite a few really, really incredible authors come that I got to hear.
Is there anyone that you can point to who made a particular impression on you at that age?
I think Phil Levine and Sharon Olds for sure. And I also got to meet Francisco Exarlocon, who's since passed, but he was a Latino poet and he was writing in English, Spanish, and Nahuatl. And it was amazing. I'd never seen that. And his book was really important to me. And that was one of the first books I ever got signed.
So you take this survey course at the University of Washington. It sort of lights you up. And then you go on to get your MFA at NYU.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Was that something you were kind of conscious of, or did somebody nudge you in that direction?
I had a wonderful teacher once I had gotten into the advanced poetry course, her name was Colleen McElroy, and she was an incredible poet, and she was a badass. And she pulled me aside and asked me what I was doing after graduation. And I said, well, I think I'm going to apply for graduate school in theater. And she said, I think if you want to do that, of course, but I think that you should apply for graduate school in creative writing. And it was something I actually had not even thought about. I didn't know what that looked like, or I didn't have any experience with it. And so she nudged me in that direction in a big way. And I talked to one of my theater professors about my love for poetry and my thought process behind maybe switching my life. And they were really supportive. They said, go for it. And so I applied for graduate school. I took a year off and I worked as a receptionist for King County Water and Land Resources Division in Seattle. I was a receptionist for 300 people at a headset and all of the different lines that you would transfer people to. And I remember when I got into NYU, they called me at my job and I put the person on hold because I answered as the receptionist. And then they said, is Ada Limón there? And I said, please hold. And then answered in my own voice and said, oh, hi, this is Ada, as if I had not been the person that answered the phone. And found out I was accepted to NYU. And, I couldn't afford to go there to visit or check it out or anything. I just, I could only afford the one-way ticket. So, moved sight unseen to New York City. Thought I would stay 2 years for graduate school and ended up really falling in love with the city. And also, I had such a good group of friends there that it felt like, oh, I love this place. So I stayed in New York for 10 years.
I want to talk to you about talent, because I think when it comes to, say, like being a novelist, like writing narrative, maybe there are more explicit ways that we can point to how a person is gifted. They have unusual insight into the human condition. They have this knack for writing dramatic narrative that's like really gripping and propulsive. And I guess nonfiction, personal narrative, it's sort of similar with some differences. But when it comes to having like a natural facility as a poet, you've worked in academia too, and you've nurtured young poets, and you've probably seen the work of young poets who do have some kind of spark. And you yourself obviously were recognized as a young person for having some ability in this department. That's one side of the ledger. The other side is obviously hard work and dedication and all that goes into the labor of making yourself into an artist. But I'm interested to hear you talk about what is it that makes a poet gifted at poetry?
That's a really wonderful question. And I don't think I've ever been asked that. And I think for me, and I'm sure it's different for everybody, as it might be for novelists and nonfiction writers as well. But I think it has to do with two things. One of them is the ability to look deeply at the world and see its connections in really interesting ways, surprising ways, and how that informs the way the mind works in terms of whether or not you are surrendering to the way your brain pattern works. So if I'm looking at something, I'm then remembering something, and then something else comes, and trusting myself enough to write that down, going, oh, okay, I'm going to follow that. So I think there's a little bit of a surrender to the, I don't want to say madness, but mayhem of the inner workings of the brain and the synapses and the heart and the blood. And being able to see that, going, okay, I'm going to trust that. I'm going to follow that. Not always trying to contain it, not always trying to make something perfect, but trying to make something that really represents what it is that the mind is doing, that the brain is doing. And then the second element of that is to have a real strong internal sense of music and rhythm. And I think that a lot of times what we recognize in poetry that we like is a sort of syntax and prosody that has a natural breath work, that has a natural musicality to it, that feels both familiar and new.
Are you musical? Can you sing? Do you play instruments?
I can sing. I was in a band for a little while, and I play guitar, but not for anybody else.
Yeah, that's really well said. And it's interesting to me to think of like the innate part of that, but also like the cultivation part. Like learning a musical instrument, developing a sense of rhythm, that is something you can work at. And it obviously comes from a lot of reading and a lot of writing. And I want to hear a little bit about your apprentice years in New York post MFA. I mean, they were already in process, but once you get out, I think there are probably a lot of listeners who are poets or who write poetry or aspire to publish books of poetry. And it can probably seem like, how in the heck does a person make their way in the world with this as their vocation?
Yeah.
And I know that you worked for Condé Nast for many years. You had to take on jobs. You get out of your graduate education, and I'm imagining you're hoping to write and publish, but you've also got to keep a roof over your head. Can you just talk about how it unfolded?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I used to say that they say do what you love and the money will follow. But if you're a poet, you do what you love and also get a job. And the nice thing about making poems, and I don't know if it's the same for novelists, you would have to tell me, but I think that is that we can do it in an hour a day or a couple hours a day. And so I could wake up early and write, and I could come home and write. And even at work, I could write. And I think that is wonderful because we can have really strong concentrations of time and do something, whether or not it might not be a full poem, but it might be a draft of something. And so I took jobs. My first gig was at GQ as an assistant. I'm trying to remember if I worked for I think I worked for the VP of marketing. And I did start to write letters for him because I was starting to correct his grammar. And I was like, I think you could make this letter a little better. And he was like, oh, I didn't know you could write. And I said, yes. And so then from there, I started looking at other jobs, and I got a job at Martha Stewart. I worked as the events manager for a long time. I also worked for Brides, Modern Bride, and Elegant Bride. And I did events and copy. And then I went back to GQ as the copy director, which was one of my favorite jobs. And that was writing ad copy and headlines. And that was really fun. And then from there, I went to Travel and Leisure, and I was the creative services director. So I was the head of the copywriting and marketing department, as well as the art department.
So you're working all of these jobs in like what I would characterize as like a literature adjacent, like line of work. You're near it, that magazine, those are, the big glossy magazines, and there's some great writing in those magazines. And then I read that you reached a kind of personal pivot point when you lost your stepmother.
Yeah.
In, I guess, an untimely way. I don't know what happened, if it was an illness or...
I don't know. Untimely. Yeah. Isn't that an interesting phrase with death?
Yeah. Who's to say, right?
Yeah. But she was 51. She died of colon cancer in 2010. And I was working on my third book at the time. And I remember being by her deathbed and working on copy edits and her helping me with things. And when she died, it just was this really eye-opening, life-changing experience, as many people who have gone through it know, which is that I really felt like I needed to change my life. I liked my life, I liked my job, and I really had a great group of friends and community. But I thought, what if I only get to 51? And if that is the case, what do I want to do? And I wanted to devote myself to poetry, to making a go of the creative life more and more. And so when I got back home, or got back to New York after her death, I gave them a 6 months notice, actually, just so that we could really get someone in there. And I really loved my team. And I remember I moved back to California. I have a dear friend, who had an extra apartment on her property. And she said, we'll put a kitchen in and you can have this little apartment. And my father drove down my stepmother's old car from Seattle to Sonoma, so that when I landed, the car was there. And I had the little borrowed car, and I had the borrowed apartment, and I thought, yeah, this is how I'm gonna live. And I started writing, and it was really fascinating because, of course, I thought I had saved up a little money, and that it was really a little money, and how quickly my idea of going into the full-time arts world shifted into freelancing for all the magazines that I had just left, which was great. And it was good because it kept me afloat. But I was able to work from home, and I was able to re-envision what that looked like for me. And I was able to focus more on the creative life.
Yeah, we talked about how maybe poetry is a little bit more spiritually informed oftentimes than other literary genres or verticals or whatever. I think maybe poetry is a little bit more death haunted. Not that other forms can't be too, but do you agree with that?
I was just going to say that I think that that's the difference. It's funny, right before you said that. And I was thinking about Lorca's speech when he talks about duende. And in one of the things about duende is that it's about the recognition of death. That's the first idea of duende, is that it's the recognition of death, and that it's always with you, and that sort of moves up through you at all times. And I think poetry is that. It's the recognition of death, and therefore the recommitment to life, to living.
And, there's a lot that happens for you in between this move back home and this life in this borrowed apartment with the borrowed car and this kind of first big commitment to your art. But I want to get to the Poet Laureate because as I was preparing, first of all, whenever I'm reading somebody's bio and it's like winner of the National Book Award, graduated cum laude from, I'm just like, I can feel myself start to tense up a little bit. Like, it's just natural.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
I was getting ready to talk to you and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be talking with the Poet Laureate of the United States of America. And I was kind of getting in my head about it. And then I was like, wait a minute. What the fuck is the Poet Laureate of the United States of America? I was like, is she like the CEO of poetry? She's the president of poetry. Yeah. She was the president of poetry. Like, I want to talk to you about, I think to begin, the moment when you find out that Poet Laureate is on offer. And what was your understanding of the job when it was offered to you?
Well, I grew up knowing about the Poet Laureate. And I remember when my old teacher, Phil Levine, became Poet Laureate and how excited I was for him. And then following the careers of Natasha Trethewey and of Tracy K. Smith and Joy Harjo and Juan Felipe Herrera, Billy Collins, Robert Pinsky, all of these people that served as Poet Laureate. So I knew about it. I didn't know what the requirements were, but it's not something that you apply for. It's not something that is on your radar at all. And so when I got the invitation, it was an anonymous Zoom call that was set up by my representative. And she said, log on. I can't tell you what it is. And I logged on and I saw the 14th Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden, and she invited me to serve as the 24th Poet Laureate of the United States. And I was so, this is a word I don't use, but flabbergasted is the word. I was really shocked and scared, to be honest. I was scared because I had just come off of making my 6th book. And I had just come back from New York, and I know you do, book tour. Your body is going, okay, I just finished this big tour, I launched the book into the world. Now I'm going to just take a little break. Now I'm going to write again. I'm going to just think and be. And then I got this call, about a week after I got home, maybe 3 days after I got home. So I thought, okay, maybe I'm not going to rest for a little while.
So you said yes on the spot,
I would imagine. Yes on the spot.
How can you turn it down?
You can't. I mean, I couldn't. It's not, no, I would not have turned it down.
Did you know it's Carla Hayden was the Librarian of Congress?
Yes.
Did you know who it was? Like, were you, because you went in anonymously, when this person appears on your screen, I don't think I would be able to clock Carla Hayden.
I did know who she was. Yeah. I'm a big fan of librarians. And so, she's, she was the best.
And so when you saw her, did you know what was coming?
I knew immediately. Yeah. And the head of the poetry and literary division at the time was a man named Rob Casper. And so I saw him and I saw her and I knew.
And then you become the Poet Laureate.
Yeah.
And what happens?
Yeah. Well, I collapsed for a little while and was like, what is my life? And I think the strangest thing, and you might understand this in some ways, is that the strangest thing was that I went from being a poet to talk about my poems and my art and what I make to talking about poetry. The idea of poetry. What is poetry? Why poetry? Who should read poetry? Why is poetry important? And the shift was really fascinating to me because it immediately went from like, oh, this is what I make. This is my art, to the public realm of poetry. What does it serve? Who should read it? Who has access to it? Why is it important? And that was really, I learned so much immediately, like being thrown into the deep end. I thought, okay, I've got to learn how to talk about this in a way that makes me not sound insane. And also makes it so that if you're a young person and you're interested in poetry, or you're not interested in poetry, you might think, hey, that sounds kind of cool. I might be interested in that.
Yeah.
And I took it seriously. I took it really seriously.
I can imagine it's an outstanding education. I remember this from my teaching years where I had to teach composition and grammar. And I got the textbook and I just remember being like, I better read this. Like, I better know this stuff. Like, I kind of intuitive.
Like, what is a semicolon?
Yeah. I mean, you sort of intuitively know these things and
then how do you talk about it?
How do you talk about it? So, but when your hand is forced in that way, and if you accept the responsibility incumbent upon, like, say, the Poet Laureate, it is a great education for you. Like learning how to talk about poetry and to advocate for it and to explain it, that probably makes you a better poet, I would imagine.
I think so. I hope so. And it was such a crash course because everything immediately shifted into that realm of being able to articulate why poetry matters and also talk about how it can be used as a public tool. And then, we decided to do a big project. So my signature project was called You Are Here, where I focused on putting poems into national parks. And then, of course, the project became poetry, nature, but also working with federal agencies, partnering so that Zoom calls were sometimes 50, 60, 70 people, just so we could put a poem on this beautiful picnic table in this beautiful landscape, and someone might be able to sit on it, read the poem, and then there was a prompt that said, what would you write to the landscape around you? Because I wanted people to be able to also respond. And that project just sort of then took off and consumed the next 2 years of the laureateship. The first year was really the speaking about it, talking about it, thinking about the project. And then the second 2 years were really spent all in on bringing the project to life.
You're traveling a lot, like you're speaking engagements. Yeah. That's what the job is. It's like you have to go around to universities and I don't know where else and talk about poetry.
Yeah. Yeah, you talk about poetry. And the nice thing about partnering with the parks was that I got to go to the national parks.
Do you have an office?
There is an incredible office of the Poet Laureate, which is are you familiar with the Library of Congress?
I mean, in a very passing
Have you
way.
been to the Library of Congress?
I have not.
Okay. So the Library of Congress is 3 buildings. And the oldest building is the Jefferson Building, which is really incredible. It's a building that was one of the first buildings that was built when electricity, when it first came out. So all of the light structures are the original lamps and light structures. So it's incredibly ornate. It's probably one of the most beautiful buildings in all of Washington, D.C. So the Jefferson Building, if you go to the attic, inside of the attic, there is this large room, which is the office of the Poet Laureate. And it has a balcony that overlooks the Capitol. And you can open the window and it looks right out to the Capitol. And it's really stunning. And also you think, wow, Gwendolyn Brooks used to have office hours here. Elizabeth Bishop wrote a poem looking out this window when she served. So it has this really deep and rich history. And it's also just so remarkably special in the sense that it has been preserved and protected for poetry.
Yeah, it's like the Oval Office of poetry.
It is.
And what an honor. Mm-hmm. Did you move to DC to be the Poet Laureate, or were you just kind of there sometimes?
Yeah, I was there quite a bit, but I was lucky that at the time I was living in Kentucky. My husband and I were there, and we were in Lexington, and it had a direct flight to DC that was pretty quick. So I was very lucky. I think it would have been harder in California.
Did you meet people? I mean, I'm imagining you met lots of people in government, but did you meet like politicians? Does the Poet Laureate interface with the president, or do you meet like senators?
I did, yes. President Joe Biden was responsible for creating something called the Violence Against Women Act. And it was the 30th anniversary of when he wrote that into law. And I was invited to write a poem for that occasion. And I joined him on the South Lawn to honor the Violence Against Women Act. It was really, really moving. I also did a couple of events in the White House with Dr. Biden that celebrated youth poets. And that was really remarkable.
This can't be happening with Trump. Yeah. He doesn't care about the poet. There's no way he's having the Poet Laureate to the White House, is he?
No. No.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
No,
it just seems like
there's a new Poet Laureate who's really wonderful, Arthur Z., and who's the 25th Poet Laureate of the United States. And Arthur is, his project is a translation project, and it's working primarily with the library. And so I think that's a really beautiful use of the laureateship right now, which is to work really in and with the library itself, as opposed to, the sort of larger federal agency project that we were able to do during a different administration.
Yeah. I mean, I read about Carla, the Trump administration dismissed her. Like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far, but I just want to say, broadly speaking, that like arts with the Kennedy Center, there's different ways that the arts are under pressure, and it's not a great time for people. There's book banning.
No, it's so terrifying. And it breaks my heart because I gave my last speech on April 17th. So it was about a year ago. And we had done so much and so much incredible work with the parks, with the library, with NASA, all of these partnerships. And I got to meet stewards, like people who are looking after books and libraries and artifacts, and stewards of the land, and people who are fighting for climate justice, and all of these people who are just working for all of the things that we should believe in. And during that talk, right beforehand, about, I would say, a dozen people came in having just had their offices been raided by Doge, and some having lost their job. And so when I took the stage to do my final talk after 3 years of service, as proud as I was of the work that we had done, my heart was really broken for what was coming, what was already there, and what I knew would be destroyed, and some of which I don't know will come, it'll come back.
Well, I think the National Park, the You Are Here project, that was sort of the signature project of your tenure. I want to talk a little bit more about it because I think it's such a great idea.
Thank you.
It's like one of those ideas where you're like, oh yeah, that's perfect. Like, if you're going to find places to make poetry accessible in a public space, like what better place than the majesty of a national park? These places are, I guess they're not necessarily free to enter, but it's like they can be, and lots and lots of Americans cycle through, and I think like a wide spectrum of Americans cycle through. Mm-hmm. So it's just a great idea, and I just want to hear a little bit more about how that idea came to be. Was this solely something that flowered in your mind? Were you in conference with other people and you sort of arrived at this?
I feel like I never did anything alone, which was great at the laureateship, because a lot of what you're doing is just talking through what's possible. I had lots of outlandish ideas to begin with my signature project ideas. And I thought, I want to get a plane that flies over flies over burn scars on land with native seed packets that have poems on them that would sprout all of these native to reforest areas. But, that was maybe a little too out there for the Library of Congress.
I'm on board. I'm all for it.
Yeah. Well, if anyone wants to fund that, I'm here. Let me know. be in touch. But, so I had a lot of outlandish ideas, and then we started thinking about partnering with the national parks. And we met with this one woman who worked at the library named April. She was incredible. And she said, you know what? I think we need to be in touch with the parks. I think you've got to do this. And she had worked for the parks. So she had an in and just was like, you know what? Let's bring all this group together. And after our first call, I thought, oh, this is going to be good. This is the right thing. And we were trying to figure out how to make it work. And of course, my first idea was a poem in every single park, across the country. And then they were, let's start with 7 different regions so that we kind of open up and you see it sort of covering the country. And we worked with Harper's Ferry Design, which is the great folks who do all the park signage that you see and came up with these ideas of picnic tables. And the picnic tables are accessible. So that when I say accessible, they're, if you're in a wheelchair, they're elongated on one side so that if you sit in a chair, you would be at the same height as anyone who was on the bench. And they have a poem on them, and I call them legacy poems of mostly of people who have passed. And then there's a prompt. So you read the poem, you look at this beautiful area, and then you can write your own poem. But I actually didn't even want to call it a poem. You'll note that I say, what would you write to the landscape around you? Because I wanted people not to be intimidated and think, oh, I would never do that. But think, oh, maybe I'd write a sentence, or I'd write a little note that says thank you, or, So I really wanted to make it as available and friendly as possible.
What about materials? Like, are these poems that are in national parks intended to be really enduring? Are they carved into granite? Like, what are these tables made out of?
The tables are, I wish I had one point I knew all this, but they're like a metallic material, and they were designed so that they can withstand quite a few seasons of harsh weather. And then they're actually double-sided. So when they do get disrupted by the wear and tear, you will flip them over and they will have the poem on the other side and they'll be fresh. Oh. So they should be able to last quite a long time.
That's cool. And then I also have to say that there is a poem of yours, I believe, that is engraved in your own handwriting on metal affixed to the Europa Clipper spacecraft, which is going to be arriving at Jupiter, in the Jupiter system in 2030. Mm. First of all, is that a first? Yeah, that's crazy. That's so cool. You have to be thrilled by that. First poet to get a poem sent to Jupiter, right? You've got to be the first.
Yeah. Yeah. Very bizarre. And really, that was an ask it came right away too. I think, I was at the library when it happened and we got a phone call and they said, would you have time to Zoom with NASA? And I said, yeah, of course. And, they were sort of pitching me on this, oh, this is the project. And I kept being like, yeah, I want to do this.
Yes, of course.
But I had no idea at the time. They just kept saying, make a poem for this mission. I did not know it was going to be engraved on the vault plate. And I certainly did not know it was going to be in my own handwriting. I didn't know any of that. So I'm actually glad I didn't, because I think I was asked in September, I agreed in September, and then the poem was due in January. And I made the poem sort of thinking it was going to be along with materials and, other things. And then when they showed me how it was going to be affixed to the side of the spacecraft and on the vault plate, and then they asked me to do it in my own handwriting, I was actually glad I didn't know that when I was composing it, because I think the pressure would have maybe silenced me a little too much, as you might imagine.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I guess will the Clipper be sending back photos of the different moons? And
the Europa Clipper's primary mission is to actually find out if the water, well, I say water in quotes here, that is that makes up Europa, which is an icy moon, that they believe has all of the ingredients for life. And so what they're going to be doing is collecting samples of the water and then sending back that information to us. So we find out what exactly that water is made out of, and if it does have the ingredients for life.
But no seed packets dropped onto the surface of Europa, as far as you know. Not yet. All right. Well, what is next for you? Like, now that your tenure has ended, you've moved back to Sonoma. I'm imagining you're kind of in a new era now, right? The laureate era is over, and now it's what?
You know, one of the things that's been so lovely was that one of my publishers for Scribner was at the talk, and she had said, would you make a book out of this talk, like an expanded version of the last speech? And so we made the book Against Breaking on the Power of Poetry, and that just came out this week. So that has been really marvelous. And it was also as I talk about all the projects we did, it was a nice way to commemorate. You know, I think, as you know, with our lives in the creative world, it can be so easy to just go on like, oh, what's the next thing? And you kind of almost catch up with yourself. And this was a moment to reflect and be like, oh, I did that. I made these things. And so that book has been really wonderful to see in the world. And now I'm working on poems. It's National Poetry Month, so I'm trying to write one poem a day, which is a ridiculous endeavor, but it's fun. And they just turn out into little seeds. They're little seeds themselves, not really poems, but little drafts. And I'm working on some prose about moving home too, just because it seems like a large, almost the poems can't contain it in some ways. It feels like there's a lot to experience and work through. And just the strangeness of being away since 17 and coming home to the same home. My grandfather built the second story of this house, and I actually found my name written in the garage in the cement I wrote when I was 7 years old. So it feels like this house is haunted, but in a really good way. And it's been inspiring a lot of creativity on my end.
So the prose that you're working on would be like a memoir?
Sure. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know what that, maybe.
Well, congratulations. I mean, I'm imagining too, you're kind of exhaling a little bit. It's such a busy cycle for you, this unexpectedly busy cycle for you. And there's so much outward facing stuff, and poets tend to be such inward people. At least a good amount of time has to be spent inward. So it's probably nice to have a chance to sort of stop having to be public facing so much and to be able to kind of turn towards the inner work that you do as a poet, right?
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think, I love doing interviews. We had talked about that before. I actually really enjoy it. I tend to meet people, and I find it most of the time, it's a really good conversation that I would have liked to have anyway. But I do think that my favorite thing to do is to be in the audience when someone else is reading. Like, I love going to book events for other people. I'm the best audience member because I just it's so joyful for me to hear other people's art, So one of the things that I've been focusing on being home is just reading again, is reading and being able to support everyone's work that I want to support and show up for others. And that's been really great, because I think as an artist, sometimes if you have a little run, if you will, you can get a little myopic into your own world. And then when it's over, you can look up and go, oh, there's this book that everyone's talking about. I want to read that or this. And that's been, it's been really joyful doing that, along with getting to know the landscape again here of my homeland has been awesome. All the same birds, like family.
Well, I wish you well. There's not a podcaster laureate. I'm still waiting for the call. Maybe one day there will be an anonymous Zoom call.
You never know. You never know.
I think Trump is going to institute the podcaster laureate. Joe Rogan is going to be the first ever.
I was going to say, I don't think you would be named.
No, it'll be Theo Vaughn will be the first ever podcaster laureate. But just such a delight to meet you. And
same here. I love your podcast, so it's really nice to meet you.
Well, thank you so much, and I wish you well.
Thank you. You too.
All right, there we go. That was me talking with Ada Limón, the 24th Poet Laureate of the United States of America. I think she's the first Poet Laureate of the country that I've ever spoken with here on the program. So we are breaking new ground. It was fun, right? She was totally delightful. And that new book of hers that we were talking about is called Against Breaking on the Power of Poetry. It is available from Scribner. If you would like to learn more about the book or about Ada, or both, you can find her online at adalimon.com. She also has an Instagram, so check it out. Again, the book is called Against Breaking. Go get your copy right away. Don't forget to subscribe to the Otherppl Show if you haven't done that yet. Hit the subscribe button wherever you listen, and you can follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram. Sign up for my newsletter over at Substack. Support the show at patreon.com/otherpplpod. Join my book club over at otherppl.com. Get yourself a t-shirt or a sweatshirt while you're at it. And if you would like to get some deep dive courses, you can do that at deepdive.audio. Stream the courses online or via the Deep Dive app. And finally, if you have a moment and you want to help me out, please give this show a rating wherever you listen. And maybe write a little review if that's an option. It helps the show in the algorithm and it helps it find new listeners. So I think that does it for today. I should be back on Thursday with a brand new episode of Brad and Mira for the Culture, the Otherppl Show's weekly pop culture assessment. I will be joined, as always, by my millennial friend and co-host, Mira Gonzalez. And we'll talk about pop culture, and we will try to have a laugh. So it's an intentionally unserious show that I feel like I need. I need to do something intentionally unserious, considering how serious the times are. So if you need a break from the real, check out Brad and Mira for the Culture on Thursday. All right? Take care of yourselves out there. I'll talk to you soon.